Welcome to the Awakening Podcast. You can find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org. We're also on BitChute, not on YouTube. Depends on what we discuss today. We probably won't be talking about the Vax or Max, so we should be able to put it on my personal YouTube channel as well. I've got 4 other podcasts, and I'm a podcasting coach. You'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. Today, my guest is the author of 7 books. Please welcome Charles Smith.
How you doing, Roy? It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no problems. You might let the audience know. Who's Charles?
Charles is a father, first and foremost, to 2 great kids. I'm a 7-time author. I'm a survivor of a suicide attempt, 30 years in addiction recovery. What else? Almost 50 years of post-traumatic stress disorder. And just survivor of the kind of life where people, I tell my story and people are like shocked that I'm still here. So that's me.
No, and because obviously, researching for this, so I know that it started off at a young age. So you might just kind of bring us through your journey and as it went by.
Yeah. I started out like the normal kid, the best dressed kid in town. I had everything I wanted. And then my father lost everything. I don't know how that went with him and my grandfather to their graves. Have no idea how. But then at that, when I was 6 years old, my mother passed away of drugs and alcohol, mixing pills and alcohol. And then then my father moved me and my sister around, um, literally 10 homes in 11 years. And that's one of my books, 10 Homes in 11 Years. It describes that whole time of my life.
And just on that, because I just know from people, that's very hard at that age, because when you know you're moving or you just move, to build friendships and everything in that area. And I don't know, were they putting you in different schools, but that must have been in itself. I mean, obviously losing your mother at a very young age, but to be traveling and constantly changing, it must have been really difficult for both of you.
No, yeah, it was really hard for me and my sister, and I'm sure my dad too. But yeah, I repeated the 2nd grade because I didn't go to school enough because of all the moving around we did. And I I remember the last place we lived was just horrible. Like destitute. My father had a job as a gas attendant, and we lived in what I guess I would call a shack. Like my father and I shared a bed. We had a mattress, no box spring. Our clothes were in cardboard boxes. Um, we had a fold-out table for a dining room table. We had one of those dinner trays for a TV stand. And just, if I remember correctly, our bathroom floor was concrete. Yeah, just crazy. Yeah, and my father died in Van Horn, Texas. I still remember that day. I woke up and he was making coffee and I could see outside the bedroom window. I mean, the bedroom doorway, and something was off. I couldn't tell what it was, but I went out the door, hugged him, and told him I wanted to stay home from school that day because I didn't tell him I thought something was wrong, but I just said I want to stay home from school. He told me I missed enough and I had to go. And then at that time, I went to the bathroom, stuck my finger down my throat so I could appear sick. And then I went back to him and told him, hey, I'm sick. We went to a store and he passed out on me in the store after I did stay home and my sister went to school. And the store clerk knew him and knew that he was a diabetic. So um gave him some orange juice and that revived him. That brought him back to normal. Then we went back home and he passed out on me again. I ran over to my neighbor's house, got her, and then we brought him over to the local hospital, and he died on a gurney with me holding his hand.
Oh,
Mm.
that is such a trauma for 11 years of age. You were at that stage.
Yeah, yep, yep. And then we moved back here to Massachusetts. I could actually see through this wall in front of me. I could see the house that I grew up in, or the house that my mother passed away in, and that I was in for the first few years of my life.
And I mean, after both traumas, because I mean, you were still a very young child. So, did you continue schooling then after that, or what happened?
Yeah, my family here. Sorry, just got over a cold. My family here put me and my sister into school, and I had psychiatric help because I was severely in shock. My sister told me that I didn't speak for 6 months after we got back home. She told me that I didn't even talk to her. I just didn't talk to anybody. And I did have some friends that I still have to this day after coming back home. I met, and those bonds I think helped me through all the years of school and everything.
And is your sister younger or older than you?
My sister's 2 years older than me. Yep. Yeah, and it was weird because she didn't seem as affected by it. Maybe because of the age, but I seem to be more affected by, and she was in school while I was there, with my father, so she didn't witness that. And
I think the trauma, because usually when you're a young child, you're kind of closer to the mother till you're about the age you were 6 or 7. Then you get a huge bond with your father, and the fact that you were moving around, but it was like your only role model as such. So you've then lost the closest person at a very young age. So it's understandable that was switched
yeah,
off and not talking.
yeah, if it was anything like me and my son are now, then we're inseparable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often look at him and I think of where I was when I was 10, and it's going to be tough when he becomes 11, I think, because that's going to be the year that, how old I was when my father passed away.
And
Yeah.
when you were then, it was your uncle, I believe. Was it your uncle and grandfather that were looking after you both then after that, yeah?
Well, my grandmother and grandfather were my legal guardians, but they didn't have room in their house. So we moved next door to them, and that was my aunt and uncle. At one time, my whole family lived on one street.
And did the
Yeah.
state or was there anyone that was kind of trying to provide help? Like it's hard at that age, like, but I don't know, were they actually doing things like that to try to help you at that age? You know, like outside, I don't mean with the parents, but I mean medical help or psychiatrists to help from the serious trauma that you went through.
My my family put me through therapy. They put me through a couple of years of psychology with a therapist, I think, and it I don't recall if it helped or not, but I do recall I pushed away any form of parenting or anything like that. I just didn't want it.
I mean, I'd say unconsciously it was like you didn't want to get close because anyone you were close to was actually, passing on.
Okay.
So what happened then after that, like as you were getting, into your teens?
So I was getting into my teens. Me and my friends got into drinking and smoking pot and smoking cigarettes and stuff like that. And I started hanging out with my cousin who was into more serious stuff. And at that time I started doing the same thing. He was like my idol growing up. So he had like a woman on each arm and the biggest truck in my city and money flowing out of his pockets. So I idolized him. So anything he was doing, I was like, oh, if that's what it takes to make it, then that's what it takes. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I started doing crack cocaine and cocaine, and yeah, I partied with him, partied with the entire like Worcester is made up of 7 hills, 7 sections, and like Grafton Hill is where I was brought up, and we would all to everybody on the hill would get together and party in different areas. So we would do that all the time. After school, sometimes during school, on
And
the
where
weekends.
where was your headspace? Like, were you able to sleep, or were you just constantly thinking of this, or did you kind of isolate it and just kind of closed it off as if it never happened?
At that time, my mind was racing, and I needed something to slow it down. And that's what I used to slow it down. Especially in high school, I would always smoke pot before school even started every day. Just to get my mind um, numb. You know, and I never drank during school, but I would always smoke during school, before school and lunch, after school. You know, I tried to do whatever I could to numb my head because it never went away.
Mm.
Yeah.
And because I know then that you went towards you got into the military, but what was the journey to deciding to go into the military?
Well, at that point, I was doing 1 year of postgraduate high well, in my high school, it was a trade school. So I went for painting and decorating, and then I went into automotive after that, and I went 1 year in automotive, and then I dropped out, and then I got really just I didn't want to do anything but drink and do crack, and so my aunt told me, I have a choice: get out, get a job, and don't come back. I was over 18. She had the right. I needed the tough love, you know. So I went out and I joined the military. I My father was in the military. His father was in the military. My grandfather was in the military. Well, on my mother's side, was in the military. So I have a long line of military people. So I chose the military life for a few years. Yeah.
And were you detoxing at that stage, or is it you got into the military and then you had to just start detoxing?
I didn't really detox. I mean, I detoxed enough to pass their drug screens to get in. But I really didn't detox until I was in basic training. Yeah. And that was my detox, which was really difficult because it would it wasn't just the mind, it was the body too. Like with crack cocaine, it breaks down the body. You're skinny, and I went in and
And what's the
doing.
difference? Because I've heard of cocaine where you're sniffing the cocaine. What's crack cocaine? The difference between cocaine and crack cocaine? It's the same thing, or
You smoke crack
okay,
cocaine.
all right.
Yeah, yeah. How we did it, we cooked it with baking powder and water in a spoon, and you cooked it that way, and then you put it into a pipe and you smoked it, and it went straight up into your. Just I would imagine just like sniffing it, but yeah, and my body was so skinny. I mean, I was a skinny person as it was back then, but then with adding that, uh, to do 20 push-ups was a chore for me. So doing everything that they wanted me to do, it literally almost killed me. And but I made it through with some really uh good help from a couple of the fellow soldiers. Like this guy Dagger, we call him Dagger, and this guy Hull. They would um they would get down with me every night and do push-ups, and they would push me all the time to do more and do more and do more. And I finally got to the point where I was able to pass the PT test, and I'll hang with everybody instead of falling behind. So yeah, a handful of people knew what I was going through. They were two of them that knew what I was going through.
And in the
Yeah.
is there many similar circumstances of people that have kind of gone through trauma, going through trauma, and they look for that as an escape, or is there a percentage of people that are kind of take the route that you did?
I, as far as the drugs and alcohol,
Yeah.
I would say definitely. I work for Aware Recovery Care, which is an IHAT program, and IHAT stands for In-Home Addiction Treatment, and we go into the people's homes and we work with the client for an entire year, and we help them in their first year of recovery, and the majority of them have some sort of trauma that they masked, you know, with alcohol or some other drug.
Mm.
Yeah, because when you don't want to feel what you're feeling inside, you put a mask on.
And
You know,
because I know that you got into the carving as well, which is self. Was that before that or after that? When did that start happening?
that was after the military. Um, that was in 2000, right before the year of 9/11. But my uncle and my grandfather died a month apart, and my
And they would have been basically your next closest people after you'd lost your parents, I'm assuming, yeah.
yeah, well, father figures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they were. It was like losing my father again twice. And I felt I started feeling regret, because of all the years that I wasted, because I was busy, so busy pushing them away all these years that I never let them in, and I, when they died, that all came rushing towards me, and I didn't want to feel that either, that all that guilt. So instead of going back to drugs and alcohol, I started cutting on myself to feel something other than what I was feeling.
And like basically that's just like getting a razor blade and going to a certain level that it's
Yeah,
not requiring stitches, but at the same, so you're kind of inflicting pain to stop the pain in your head, I'm assuming. Is that the kind of
right.
way? Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. 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 Yeah. And to this day, I can hardly see any of the marks. I mean, so I've seen some people that use knives, and you can see all the scars on their arms and stuff. I used a razor blade, so a lot of them you can't see. I actually have a cross on my chest that you can barely see that I carved, and but after that I decided to just end my life, and I took a bottle of sleeping pills one night, and I carved the words "F you world," you know, in my arm, and I went to sleep. And my friends found me, and I was rushed to the hospital and stomach pumped and all that. The doctor said that he was amazed that I was alive still. And then I went to Brockton, Mass. They have a VA hospital there, and which has a psychiatric unit on it. And I went there, and then they sent me to a place in Boston that was it was a shelter because my friends wouldn't let me go back to where it was because they didn't know what I was going to do. So I ended up homeless for a little bit, until I went into shelter, still homeless. A lot of the people that you see on the streets, they might be, living in shelters at night, but they're still homeless during the day.
And is it because I know, especially with vets, it's massive in America, the amount of people that are actually homeless. Is it a case that when you do find a place, there's obviously limited in numbers, but is it a case of you must get out in the morning, you can't hang out there, or are you allowed to actually,
Yeah,
yeah, you have to get out?
unless you do chores for them, then you can stay in until you're done with your chores. But a lot of places, like right now, will start filling up because it's getting cold out, and then in the spring and summer they'll trickle out, and people will start living in tents and stuff like that again, and it's a ongoing cycle. But a lot of them need more help than what's out there. I mean, 22 veterans die of suicide. Approximately 22 veterans die of suicide every day because of post-traumatic stress. And it's horrible. The stats are just phenomenal. And I don't know what the stats are of homeless veterans, but it's just it breaks my heart. I mean, there's a couple of different veterans organizations here in Worcester that do whatever they can for veterans, but it's too much. The need outweighs the amount of help that we can give. Like even during Christmas time, I adopted a veteran's family. So I can buy their kid a their Christmas gifts for Christmas. I have a 14-year-old boy that I'm gonna buy all his gifts for, so he has a Christmas because the family's down and out. And I've been there myself, where I've had to ask for that help too.
And when you were homeless, where was your head? Can you remember what was going through your mind?
I was in a weird space in my head. I went through like a gothic stage, like with painted fingernails and yeah, all wearing all black. I was just in like a dead, probably a dead phase, just existing, you know. And then at the same time, I wanted to get out of that phase because seeing the homeless veterans, that was the one thing that really opened my eyes, to not being alone. Like when I was in that first shelter, I was like, these people are suffering as much as you are, and they need help as much as you do. So you're not alone. And then I went through that phase, and I went through like a change of religion. Like a lot of my life, I grew up Roman Catholic, and I would have rathered go up and see God with my boxing gloves on than go up and see God with praying because of the way my life was. So I needed that change. So I always wore a pentacle because I liked the band Motley Crue, and that was their symbol. And I ran into a guy that told me about how that symbol represents a Wiccan religion. So I went through that for a few years, and that actually helped me out. These days, I believe if you think that that thing in front of you is going to get you through the day, and that's your God, then I'm not going to argue with you on that point. You know, it's whatever gets you through the day. I believe in God, from God to Zeus to Jesus to them all. They all, to me, they all exist, and I'm no one. I'm just a mere mortal. I'm not going to tell them that they don't exist. But yeah. Now I think I really needed that phase, because that was like my crucible, because it changed me in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
And then, because obviously, you're after making such a turnaround. How, like, going through that, where you kind of had the religion that was kind of helping you at that time, and then how did you kind of get on your feet and get yourself that it's you're helping, and we'll touch on that as well, where you're helping people because you know the trauma and how to overcome it.
Yeah. Well, I got out of my homeless situation. I got work, and I was living in a shelter while I was working, and I eventually moved on from that life, which took a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. And then I started running programs, like I learned everything I could about PTSD, and because once I was diagnosed with it in my 30s, so I was undiagnosed with it for like 25 years. But once I was diagnosed with it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn everything I can about this so I know how to live my life. You know, so I did that, and then I started running programs, talks about post traumatic stress in different places. And then I was asked about positive positive thinking, so I eventually opened up a program about that. And then I opened up a program about practical awareness, situational awareness, and those three actually became my first three books, because when my son was born, I had to make a decision. I wasn't making Those were done as a nonprofit, those programs. And for like the first 5 years as a nonprofit, you don't make a whole lot of money. So I had to make a decision, on supporting my family or keep doing that, which was not really a decision. So to keep my information out there, I made those three programs books, and those were the first three books that I wrote. And then after that, I wrote four more books after that, and I'm working on number five. So that's and I'm also republishing all of my books except for 10 Homes in 11 Years.
And I've seen reviews, there's a lot of 5-star comments basically saying how much it's helped them. So I suppose maybe guide it through, because I mean, obviously you've had such a traumatic, journey, and just from talking to a lot of people that I know myself, everybody's got their own journey, everyone's got their own battles, and it's a case of how we can actually overcome that. Obviously, you've done it and you're writing to help, and I know that you have the workbook inside and the book itself. So you might kind of guide us through something that might help those that are listening.
Well, on like post traumatic stress, and addiction recovery, it's all about coping skills. I've found that's like the main key to all of wellness is coping skills. Like for me, it's yoga. and it's meditation and it's martial arts and going for walks in the wilderness. You know, for other people, it's other things. You got to find your own coping skills. You know, we can't. I can guide someone to find them for themselves, but I can't tell you which ones to do. And that's what my books are pretty much all about: is guiding you to finding your own coping skills, to finding solutions to the problems that you face, that I faced, that I read, that I put in the books, and then I put like ways for you to think about what what you just read. And one thing I'm going to be doing different in the republishing is I'm going to ask people to have a journal with them when they read the book. And because the reason I'm doing that is because a lot of the like libraries and stuff, they wouldn't take my books in because of the lines that were in the books. They considered it empty space. Yeah, yeah. So um what I'm gonna do instead is tell the reader to have a journal with them, and there's gonna be like icons. All right, this is where you want to think about this and write down your answer. You know, so it's like a workbook still, but instead of putting the answers in the books, you're gonna put them in a journal.
Okay. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's strange that the libraries were doing that because at the end of the day, it's there to help people. And I mean, the people that are using the libraries aren't sometimes they don't have the money to actually be buying the book and they can go to the library because obviously libraries around the world are either free or very cheap. And it's a
yeah,
shame that they were doing that.
yeah. There's libraries, and I want to say was it, no, not Barnes and Noble. Some other bookstores too were doing it. They're like, no, we can't allow that because of the space in the books. I'm like, okay, the space is there for a reason. You know, the space is probably the most important part of the book.
Yeah. I'm trying to think why they would do that in the library. I presume it's because they're fair as somebody actually fills it in and then the next person has seen their information. I don't know, but yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah, but
yeah,
at least
yeah,
you're adjusting to make sure that the next re-edition doesn't have that issue.
yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah.
And so it sounds basically that people just need to find their passion because I mean, even especially in the last couple of years, like people, they're just coming home, they're drained, they're turning on the telly, they're grabbing the beer or whatever, and they're just chugging through life. Whereas
Mhm.
when you, like you say, do the yoga, whether someone likes fishing, whether they like, you're just finding passions because when you're doing your passion, you're in the happy mode. And then when you come back, you're still happy because you've done something that's kind of, let's call it productive in the day. Whereas when you
Yeah,
do it, you're just going into that negative spiral. And then when you're at home, your head is talking to you and you go through it. So it's just trying to get people because when you're down in the dumps, it's hard to actually see light at the end of the tunnel. And at the end of the day, it's trying to find your passion. And sometimes you never know your passion because one, the education system, it kicks out music, it kicks out art and all these. And sometimes that can be the thing. Someone just painting and they tend to get rid of all the creative things. Like the whole education system is organized to actually make people depressed. That's the way I see it. Like there's so many things that
mm,
they're doing instead of the opposite.
exactly, exactly. Like, one thing that comes to mind is my book Awakening, and it talks about how like money is not the route to happiness. You know, and I talk about how Robin Williams and Chester Bennington and all different people that had all this money died of depression. You know, and it's like you sit back and a lot of people think, oh well, they had all this money. Why were they depressed? Well, because they didn't have the passion, or they didn't have this, so they didn't have that. You know, money can't buy you love, and money can't buy you a lot of things.
I think it was Jim Carrey said he wished everybody was, had 10 million or be successful because they'd realize that it's not what makes you happy.
Yes, definitely. Yep. That was during a speech at a college. Yes, yep. That was an awesome speech, by the way.
And because I know there was something as well that I just from doing the research and everything, there was CPTSD. What's that about?
Compounded PTSD or complex PTSD. Some people call it compounded, some people call it complex. But what that is there's PTSD where you know you're in a war and you get shot at and like me, I was blown up in a tank. I was actually blown up in a tank. But sometimes I gotta think that through. But I was. And I survived. But yeah, compounded PTSD is like when you have like my mother's death, my father's death, this happened, that happened, being blown up, being homeless, being you know a home a suicide survivor. This and everything gets. I look at it like a layer cake with multiple layers. And I th- I thought of that like when I was in the VA system fighting for my service connected for PTSD. And what service connected is a pension that you get for the rest of your life because something happened in the military that affected you, that's going to affect you for the rest of your life. Like the tank explosion or being in Cuba for 6 months like I was. But what it is the VA system thinks that you're you have civilian PTSD, and then you have military PTSD, and they're separate. When in fact they're not. PTSD is PTSD is PTSD, and it just keeps on compiling on top of each other, compounding. So that's pretty much what it is.
And like in the middle, like when when they were going to Afghanistan, Iraq, different places, based on knowledge that's now available and exposure and everything, and realizing the amount of corruption that's there, and it's like sometimes making it look like someone else is the enemy when it's really organized in-house. Like that must be kind of traumatic for everybody as well, to think that you're actually doing right and then realizing the trauma and the murdering and all that of the country that was invaded, and realizing, hey, we were told a lie.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like, who knows what's really going on in Ukraine? And, you know, unfortunately, I mean, from what I'm told, some of the pictures that you see on in the news aren't really happening. You know, I don't know if it's true or not
No,
because
I've
I'm
seen a
not
load.
there.
There was a load of stuff they were showing, pretending it was the war. It wasn't the war. I've had 3 different interviews. Like the way I see it is, both sides on the ground are actually suffering here, and I'd say the same side at the top is pulling the strings and just enjoying the whole thing faring out. But I've had somebody, their house was bombed and they just left with the clothes in their back, a woman with 4 children. They stayed in a friend of mine's house for a week or so till they moved to another country. Then I had a guy, an American guy, who actually went to the Polish border that was actually kind of helping, the refugees coming in, and he was saying both sides, like there was being rape going on, and but there was other times in like Lviv, people are saying, oh, it's terrible there. He said he went there, it was like a holiday place, like people taking pictures and everything. Then I had a Russian guy on the show who was, his wife was from Crimea, I believe, and saying a totally different story again. So you're looking at the media, you're listening to this, but I know deep down people are being hurt on the ground, and there's an evil cabal at the top that's orchestrating every single thing that's going on in the world, but they're doing that as well. And then they're creating hatred because people are, I think it's the first time that one, like with Poland and a few other countries, they didn't chuck refugees into a camp, like a concentration camp. It was like humanity. They were kind of going, hey, come into my house. But the other thing is, it's probably the first time that a country didn't hate the other country, as in the people on the this. Like I have friends that are Ukrainian, I have people that are Russian, and I know a load of them as well. They don't hate each other. It's not as if, because like before there was times, like say the Polish would hate the Germans or whatever. Like it's not like that now, and it's all orchestrated. So it's sad to see it that the people on the ground they don't have the all the food and everything to have a normal life based on all the crap that's going on.
Exactly. I believe that too. Like I think of the song War Pigs from Ozzy Osbourne. It talks about how the cabal up top is making, all the moves, and the little guys, the soldiers, are the ones that are suffering. And it's really sad. Like I remember when I went to Cuba, we went, and we those of us who had families were told, oh, you're going to be gone for a month. And then my colonel finds out that, oh, I can get my full bird colonel if I keep these guys here for 6 months. And we're the puppets, so we got to do what we got to do. But then we got to notify our families and say, hey, we're going to be gone for another 5 months. Which was horrible for a lot of like the married people there's married people who were having kids, and married people who, like I missed one of my cousin's weddings, and that's neither here nor there, because when you're in the military, you're theirs. I know a guy that got an Article 15 written up for getting a sunburn.
What's an Article 15? Because I'm not familiar with the
term. Being written up.
Okay.
Like if you messed up at work and you were written up at work, it's pretty much the same thing. For getting a sunburn, because it was destruction of government property.
And is the training like, I mean, I'm just looking at from the movies because that's all I know of it, where they're just screaming. Is that the way it actually happens? That they're screaming as you're going through the process of training?
In basic training, yeah, definitely. Yep.
I mean, how is that allowed? Like, if that's done in a corporation or whatever, it's abuse. How are they allowed to abuse people?
I think it's because they want us to be used to the shock. And now that I think about it, it's weird, because like when we were there, yeah, they were yelling at us and stuff. But then when we went to do self hand-to-hand courses, I remember my drill sergeant, Anderson. He spoke with a Cajun accent, and he was from Louisiana, and he came in the room pissed off once, and someone ever turned around and we're like, "What's going on?" He's like, "You guys aren't doing the hand-to-hand training because they're afraid you're gonna get hurt." Some of us are going to Afghanistan after this, and they're afraid of us getting hurt. But yet they're gonna yell at us like that, and shoot live rounds over our heads while we're in training. But they can't let us do hand-to-hand combat because they're afraid we're gonna get hurt.
Oh. And I don't know, is it a case of they do the yelling, they make you do what you're told. So then when they say go kill them, you're so used to actually complying to orders that you're not really thinking yourself that they have you in such a kind of mode that you just do what you're told and you just assume. And I think that's why a lot of the PTSD, it's like afterwards you kind of just realize what when you get back, shit, what just happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, there's a lot of yelling and stuff in war itself. People are screaming, people are dying, people are this. So I think that's why the psychology behind why they do that. But at the same time, yeah, it's like I don't know how else they would prepare us for that. Yeah.
They should work on peace instead of war, be the better thing because they create war. And I'm not just saying that it's only America that does that because I know there's a few other the British
No,
was doing
yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah.
doing it for hundreds of years. Like so
I definitely agree. I mean, I look at my 10-year-old son, I look at my 12-year-old daughter, I look at my 9-year-old niece, and younger in the family too, and then I look at the news and I see possible nuclear war. I'm like, are they gonna have a life to grow up in? You know, is it ever gonna?
I think that's all fair tactics to bring the vibrations down. That you're all because the conversation in the household then becomes, oh, I don't let that come into me. Like it's like I don't because they've done it before, and people then live in fear. So when you're living in fear, you're not happy. So then
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the traumas happen, or they resurface, and that's what they want.
No, and at the same time, yeah, you're right. I mean, I actually commented the other day, like, which is the fear tactic you're going with? The Armageddon or the nuclear destruction or the pandemic? Which one is it today?
Exactly.
And I'm gonna go on it. I'm gonna live my life
And
the
I think
best I can.
that's
Because
the best way to
that's all we can do.
exactly.
If we do live in fear, then we miss out on a lot of life.
So just finally with the books, because you're obviously helping people. You're going into different places to help them and go through the process. And you were saying sometimes it takes a year. Like,
Mm.
is it broken down per kind of issue, or does the different books? You might kind of just touch on the different books. I know you mentioned about the 11 houses, 10 houses in 11 years, but with
Yeah,
the trauma ones as well, like what's the kind of, so people know each book, what exactly each one's covering.
I got Operation Tip, which is post-traumatic stress and trauma, and then I have Enlighten, which is about situational awareness, surviving active shooter events, that sort of thing. And then I have Happy Mind, which is having a positive outlook on life. Then I have Awaken, which is about um, living. It's about growth. It's about learning from the past and growing to be a better person. And then I have one called Footprints, and that is about dealing with loss of a loved one, accepting the loss of a loved one. Because I've lost over 20 significant people in my life. One very recent, a good friend of mine just passed away of cancer in August. And I think that's all of them. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's enough. I know. Are you planning on writing
Yeah.
more?
No, yeah, definitely. Yep. I'm gonna go ahead. I've gotten many I'll call them requests for the next part of my memoir. I've gotten one lady who said that it was a fantastic book, 10 Homes in 11 Years, but what happened with the rest of his life? That was the review, something like that. So I'm listening to your review if you can hear me. I'm actually gonna get together with some of my old friends and we're gonna reminisce and get some stories together because a lot of my life with PTSD and I have traumatic brain injury too from that tank explosion that I was in. But a lot of my life I left like it's in a haze. You know, like I told you I didn't speak for 6 months. I totally forgot about that until I was talking to my sister about writing 10 homes in 11 years. And she told me, do you remember when we first came home and you didn't speak? Like, no. Yeah, you didn't speak to anybody, not even me, for 6 months. I'm like, that'd be a good thing to know. So,
And I suppose just when you're helping others as well after going through this, that in itself, because I feel it's like the mission then becomes bigger than you, which in turn makes light at the end of the tunnel.
no, yeah, this mission got bigger than me years ago. Like it's huge now. And you know, I realized how big it was this year when I started talking on podcasts and I'm talking to people in different countries. You know, I'm like, for years I was just going around different different TV stations around my area and talking about my books. And then the pandemic hit and I was like, okay, what am I gonna do now? And then found I um found places that I could find people on podcasts that want people for guests. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's where I'm going. And now it's gotten so much bigger too because the world is just my oyster now, you know?
No,
As they
I think
say.
podcasts are a great way to get your message out, and the fact that it's
Yeah.
international as well. And I mean, even with my like each podcast, it doesn't matter where they are because, like, I mean, I'm based in Poland, but over 50% of my audience is American. But it's something like most of them are just like I because I got five, and some of them are in 137 countries. So you're really getting the message out.
Wow. I just really love it. I mean, like technology today, I can talk to you like you're right here and you're in Poland.
No, exactly.
It's awesome. You know,
Charles, listen, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and
thank you.
I admire you for what you've done. That you've overcome such trauma and heartache, and now you've made it your mission to help others. So you might let people know where they can actually find you.
On lifelongexperience.net. It's got links to everything, my social media, everything. There's one thing that I like to say on every podcast. I talked about my suicide attempt. That was 20 years ago. My son is 10 years old. You do the math. If I was successful back then, not only would I not be here, but he wouldn't be here. You never know where your life can take you after your darkest hour. So no matter how hard things get, keep on pushing forward.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll make sure I put the link, because you've got all the books in your website as well. So I'll put the link both on the audio and the video. Thank you very much, Charles.
You are welcome, Roy.
So that's all for the Awakening Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube, and everything about me, my other 4 podcasts, and podcast coach can be found on bio.link/podcaster. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating. Really helps. Until next week, take care.